and welcome to Cyber Centre Training. In this video we'll be talking about how PowerShell can be used to generate SOC reports and gather information that's useful in a cyber investigation. There are two parts to this. One is for laptops with Wi-Fi and the other is if we're looking with a connected computer to the domain. So if we have a look at the SOC report for the Wi-Fi enabled computer, here you will see that it has generated the HTML report, has the date and timestamp, so we know when these events occurred on this computer. We start by doing a timestamp and date, so we can determine the date and time that the report was gathered. Then we look at gathering basic system information. What antivirus do they have installed? Are there any Windows Defender logs? We do a Windows Defender scan, which is a full scan. We look for unassigned processes. These can be potential threats as these are not signed by a vendor. We also look at firewall status, whether that's been altered, turned off or changed in any way. We have a look at the system shadow copies. Are there any system shadow copies that we can check? We look at user accounts that are on the computer. We look for any of those accounts that are administrators. We're interested in any third-party services that are not Microsoft certified assigned. We look at all the running services on the machine. We then check for startup items in the registry from HKey local machine, current user, start menu, run. We also look at the start menu programs, if there's any programs running in there. Then we gather some basic IP configuration information and ARP information. Then we look at the active connections and list imports. Then we do an established active connections and total established connections only, including the processor ID and running process. Next we have the task list, and we do the same for that. We look for the process name, the PID and the executable path. So when we're looking at the active connections, we can quickly see if the PID has an executable path, say for example a payload that is sent to run in the background. This is what we're particularly interested in, is what is actually connected to our machine and should it be connected. This is very helpful in determining that, so we look at the active connections and also the active processes, including the executable path. Then we have a look at the process name overview, so we can quickly find process's name. We gather a list of Wi-Fi's that the computer can see in its range. We also look at any that the computer is connected to previously. We look at the Wi-Fi SSID, so we can determine the logs that we'll be looking on there. We look at connected interfaces, so we can see whether it was connected Wi-Fi or hardwire. We look at network shares and to see if we can find anything in there. We check the host file just to make sure it hasn't been tampered with, to check for DNS poisoning. We look at the download history, so we're particularly interested in what's been downloaded. Have they downloaded a file that contained a virus? We also have a look at emails and the header and footer information on the emails, so we can then go through and determine where that email source was from. We look at the files that are on the PC, also checking for any newly created files. We look for recent activity, recent history, so we can then see exactly what the user's been doing on that profile recently. We look at program data, seeing if there's any temporary files been made by malware. Again, another location that we check is the temporary files. We look at USB drives that have connected to the machine. This can help in investigations and finding out whether somebody is intending to run malicious activity using a USB, and did that USB contain any files that were dangerous. Then we look at the Windows updates, and we have a look specifically at failed Windows security updates, so we can check that the machine is fully patched, and also that there is no issues around CVEs or exploits around that security update that has not been patched. Then we look at installed programs. We can see what programs have been installed. Are there any new ones? Are there any remote control software that we need to be aware of? Then we look at the last 10 login sessions of the user. This can determine whether the user has been actively logging in at unusual times. Then we do a full port scan of vulnerable ports that are known. Are any open? If so, we need to investigate. Has there been any compromise? We'd go and do an Nmap scan, which was a bit more further and in depth. And finally, we would look at alternate data streams, also known as ADS, looking for signs of stagnography. This is where users are able to hide files behind images, text files, etc. So these are the things that we would typically look at. This report gathers the evidence, so then you can go through and then make your incident report. For the domain, the only alterations was having the fact that it would look for domain accounts. The rest is the same, but it won't scan for wireless activity, as it will be a hardwired connection. So you would typically run this report for domains. I will leave both of these PowerShell scripts in the description, so you can then download them and run them when you need to do an analysis on the machine. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please rate, subscribe, and stay tuned for any further content.